out there. You can grab one later if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. My colleague Michelle Perez, who's the report author, and her colleagues from American Farmland Trust are with us today. It's great to have you here. We worked on this project and this report together. Michelle tells me there's about 50 people here in the room and almost 300 people signed up for the webinar. So we've got a very good turnout. Got people that span the breadth of the conservation community. Got folks from USDA, from EPA, USGS, state water quality and ag agencies, county soil water conservation districts, universities, NGOs, and many others. So welcome to everyone. As some of you may know, Michelle started this report when she was still with the World Resources Institute and was able to do this work with the generous support of the Walton Family Foundation and the McKnight Foundation. We're really grateful to both of them for supporting this important work and for continuing to support Michelle and her work with her colleagues as she has moved to American Farmland Trust to make this report come to fruition and to move beyond and take the recommendations here and actually see those come to reality. Before we get started with the presentation today, just a couple of housekeeping items for folks on the phone. You can submit your text questions using the questions panel. You can probably figure out how to do that, or you've done these before from this. We'll read off the answers to those questions during the Q&A discussion later. If you have any questions, or if you're having trouble and need some information, you can email Leah Schleifer at wri.org, and she can help you with that, but do that separately. Today's presentation is being recorded, and it will be posted on both WRI's and AFT's websites within a week or so, and the report itself will be available to download this afternoon starting at 2 o'clock. So I didn't introduce myself, but I will now. I'm Betsy Otto. I'm the Global Director of the Global Water Program at World Resources Institute, and I'm very happy to have John Larson here as well. John is the Senior Vice President of Policy and Programs at American Farmland Trust, and we're going to be emceeing today. Me at the front end. I may have to leave a little early, and John will be helping to introduce the other speakers and moderating the Q&A session as well. We also have with us the distinguished Dave White, who is going to be doing a keynote presentation. Dave is the co-founder and partner of the 9B Consulting Group, which I'm sure he'll tell us a bit more about. And many of you may know him as the former chief of the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, from 2009 to 2012. We have a number of other folks that are going to be panelists as well and speaking, and we'll be introducing those folks a little bit later. So to kind of get us all on the same page and set the stage for what Michelle is going to be telling us about from the research she's done in this report, we're going to be talking about water quality problems, and particularly those associated with nutrient, sediment, pesticide, pathogen runoff from agriculture. There are certainly other sources of water pollution problems, whether from wastewater treatment facilities or urban and suburban stormwater runoff. We know that's a growing area of concern. Many of you certainly know these challenges associated with nutrient pollution that can sometimes manifest themselves in the form of toxic algal blooms. And a poster child for this would be Toledo, Ohio, in 2014, which experienced a really significant toxic algal bloom that you can see here in the photo. That was related to farm runoff that resulted in hundreds of thousands of people losing access to their drinking water. In addition to public health concerns, though, we know that there are very serious environmental concerns and impacts to wildlife and aquatic habitat from low oxygen levels in the water. Eutrophication, a term that's familiar probably to almost all of you, that is limited oxygen conditions, and hypoxia, or dead zones, where there's too little oxygen in the water for fish or other bottom-dwelling organisms like clams, mussels, and oysters to thrive. We are also seeing those challenges. And there are other issues associated with recreation and tourism. This is the kind of thing we don't like to see with beach closures associated with toxic algal blooms that we're seeing, unfortunately, more of. In the U.S., there are 15,000 water bodies that are listed as impaired from nutrient pollution. That is excess nitrogen and phosphorus runoff from fertilizers associated with cropland, pasture land, grazing land, animal feeding areas. There are obviously many more water bodies that are impaired for agricultural sediment, livestock pathogens, crop pesticides, and there are other sources of nutrient pollution as well, and certainly other impaired water bodies that come from urban runoff and other sources. This photo shows livestock manure application on cropland during the winter on frozen ground, which is not ideal due to the increased risk of runoff. But obviously it's important to also say that farm production is critical to producing the food that we eat, the clothes that we wear, and in some cases even the fuel that we put in our vehicles. So the challenge, and what we're going to be talking about today, is to find the solutions that foster environmental protection alongside good farm production. And this is not a problem that is restricted just to the U.S. by any means. This is occurring worldwide, and we're seeing actually significant growth in water quality problems around the world. This is a screenshot that some of you might be familiar with of WRI's eutrophication portal website, a map that pinpoints the location of eutrophic and hypoxic coasts, which a number of my colleagues, Sarah Walker and others, Michelle when she was here, worked on. This presents over 700 coastal areas that are impacted by eutrophication or hypoxia. So let's turn to what we're here to talk about today, having set the stage a bit with those comments. What Michelle's going to be sharing with you today is her research on how 6 projects in the U.S. were successful at implementing some of the key factors that make achieving measurable clean water possible. These projects focused their conservation efforts at the watershed scale to achieve cleaner water in streams from the cumulative conservation efforts of many farmers and landowners on many farm fields. Most of the projects conducted a geographic targeting analysis to identify the highest priority areas in the watersheds where a disproportionate amount of pollution runoff risk may be found. And once those high priority areas were located, the projects prioritized the limited financial and technical assistance they had to those areas that they could make an impact on most cost effectively. And finally, the projects also set up in-stream water quality monitoring programs to establish goals at the beginning of the project and then to track progress throughout the effort. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. Let me just give a quick introduction for Michelle, those of you that don't know her, which I can't imagine anyone doesn't, because she's a big player in this field. Michelle is the Senior Policy Specialist at American Farmland Trust, which is the national largest organization dedicated to protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land. Hope I said that well. Michelle joined AFT around this time last year, a little bit earlier, and is furthering their conservation goals at the federal and watershed levels, helping NRCS and AFT to quantify outcomes. Before AFT, as I mentioned, Michelle spent 6 years here at WRI, where she led projects on farm conservation targeting, nutrient trading, and other work. She earned a doctorate in environmental policy from the University of Maryland School of Public Policy and a BA in biology from Occidental College. So please join me in welcoming Michelle.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It is such a thrill to be here, and hope you're enjoying your lunch, and folks online, hope you're able to hear us and see everything. It is a wonderful day to be able to launch this report that has consumed upwards near 2 years of my life, but it's with special thanks to the Walton Family Foundation and the McKnight Foundation. There may be a representative, Amy Saltzman, in the room from Walton and Mark Muller online from McKnight. They've really championed this work and supported me all these years and enabled me to take the work to American Farmland Trust. I'm greatly appreciative of them. So this is just a shout out that this report today builds on the work, 3 previous water quality targeting analyses that I led, and with the support of Sarah Walker. Give a wave, Sarah Walker, here in the room, my partner in crime here at World Resources Institute, and she actually led the last Overcoming Barriers brief analysis that identified the scientific, technical, economic, institutional, political challenges to better targeting. So please use these keywords if you'd like to revisit these 3 analyses. The first one was an in-depth analysis of one of the best new kids on the block that Dave White championed, the Mississippi River Healthy Watersheds initiative. And the middle report was a great partnership I was able to have with the NRCS Conservation Effects Assessment Project modeling team to analyze what could we do if we were able to more freely geographically target our resources. So today I'm going to introduce this new report, review, compare and contrast different agency conservation approaches and how we're measuring success, tell you about the difficulty I had finding success stories, highlight some of the 6 case studies, just share a few lessons learned and share some recommendations. And because of the short time, here's what I'm not going to be able to share with you, and hopefully it'll set you up for getting excited to thumb through the report. There were 16 factors that these projects identified as critical to achieving their successes. There were 11 lessons learned that I pulled together from all of these projects and previous analyses. There are project cost tables showing where funds came from and how projects distributed them by project management categories, financial assistance, and monitoring. So if you're wondering how do these things get done, there's some tables in there for you. And there were 3 challenges I noticed, and I'll be sharing a few highlights from all of these, but I just have to warn you, the report is riveting. So it's not good bedtime reading. So it's very long, but it's a page turner. I just got to tell you. So the traditional conservation program approach, this is, let's get on the same page about this. The USDA has many federal conservation programs that really do solve individual water quality problems on individual farms. So before, this is a picture of cows leaving the dairy access walkway and a farm in Stark County, Ohio. But on the right, we're solving this gully erosion problem by putting in a grass waterway that slows runoff and traps nutrient and sediment pollution. We fortified the fence and rebuilt the walkway. Puts, water quality problem on this farm solved. And the way that NRCS has traditionally counted their progress is through what we're describing as administrative metrics. And these are dollars spent, contracts signed, acres or units of conservation practices implemented. And recently, over the last 10 years or so, NRCS has made tremendous advances in their environmental and economic modeling powers through this conservation effects assessment project, and that's a screenshot of my favorite report that I do encourage you to thumb through as well. And so they've generated modeled estimates of the nutrient and sediment reductions associated with conservation on the land. And they're even trying to do geographic analyses to identify if we could identify at the local level the highest and medium priority areas, how much more cost effective or effective that is can we be with our limited federal resources. But now I'm going to contrast that to trying to actually clean up specific streams and watersheds. So on the left side, you'll see great conservation going on in this watershed, but there happens to be an impaired stream represented by red and one lonely, unhappy fish. So the conservation you see is very dispersed in this watershed, both in and outside of the watershed, because the programs are administered at the county level. But in other targeted watershed project efforts that we're going to feature today, they recognize that the stream is the focal point of their effort, and they concentrate the right practices in the right amounts above that impaired stream, and they have monitoring in place to track their progress. So that's how we clean up streams, and those are what I refer to as targeted watershed projects. So NRCS has embarked on many of these through a variety of methods, through demonstration projects, through the Conservation Innovation Grants, through research efforts, and through programs which are called Landscape Conservation Initiatives. And there's an alphabet soup of them, and we're going to talk about several, especially the new Regional Conservation Partnerships programs today. Just a second, take a glass of water. So how are they tracking progress in these new targeted watershed project effort? Well, the MRBI, the Mississippi River Healthy Watersheds Initiative, basins in there somewhere, really encourage projects to monitor, if they chose to and could marshal resources to do it, at the edge of the field and at small and large watershed scales. They called it Tier 1, 2, and 3 monitoring. And the Regional Conservation Partnerships Program, RCPP, is doing an amazing thing by encouraging partners in watersheds and other areas to quantify environmental, social, and economic outcomes. So what I see is a shift from the traditional conservation approach towards what we're calling outcomes-oriented conservation. It's happening, and it's happening incrementally, and it's a great, great move for the agency. I wanted to share some thoughts about a sister agency, the Environmental Protection Agency's Section 319 Non-Point Source Management Program, which on their website, put in all those keywords, has 674 water bodies that have been partially or fully restored, and 2-page write-ups about every one of them, 405 write-ups. And about half of those involve agriculture. And this is a screenshot of their latest report from December last year. It's truly a page-turner. It's beautiful. I highly recommend it. So EPA, how do they do this? Well, they work with the states that implement the funds, and the states find local watershed partners. But there are 2 key elements that are critical to their success. They do require development of a 9-element watershed plan, and they really foster using 4 types of monitoring: paired watershed, before and after, let's see if I get them right, upstream, downstream, or trend monitoring. So these are the keys to working on nutrient and sediment reduction, key watershed monitoring programs. This is a screenshot from that great report I told you about. The majority of the projects are ag-related, and the majority of the monies are going to farmers and landowners. They have a very small budget, $165 million, but most of that is going to farmers. They also benefit from excellent partnerships with the NRCS conservation programs, and a lot of those funds help contribute to their success. So there's a lot of leveraging between your taxpayer resources accomplishing these successes. So I wanted to know, setting aside the EPA 319 programs, their success stories are online. We can all read about them. I wanted to know, how are these Mississippi River Basin Healthy Watershed Initiative projects doing? How are the other targeted watershed projects doing? Did they achieve in-stream monitored success? And if so, how did they do it? So I scanned the literature. I did a ton of interviews with NRCS staff, with farm conservation and water quality experts. I emailed everyone and their mother to say, do you know of targeted watershed projects out there that are achieving success? Have they already achieved success? And I finally found 21, and 6 made it in. And I conducted in-depth interviews with at least 2 to 5 different project leaders, and I read all of their documents and had, oh wow, I just bothered the heck out of them over 2 years, and they had multiple reviews of the write-ups, so it's a shared effort. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what we want to do is, ask the question, how can these agency federal conservation programs be even more successful in improving water quality, and how can those positive benefits be measured? So the first finding was how hard it was to find success stories. You like my cow there peeking out? It turns out the MRBI does have 2 published write-ups about 3 successes, and all the other alphabet soup there didn't, but I did feature the One Bay Delta Initiative write-up in the report. So what's going on? Why are there not successes yet? Well, I had to generate a few hypotheses. Is it because the monitoring programs never went in place? They're very expensive, they're very hard to do, or is it because they did go in place and that there's just this known natural lag time between conservation practices, land use changes, and in-stream processes, responding? Is it they had problems with the program design? Well, many project leaders at the Leadership in Midwestern Watersheds meeting that I attend every year, and that AFT and Sand County Foundation, a colleague in the room, helped organize, said yes, they're really struggling. And layering on the new outcomes quantification opportunity, many of them are saying, what does that mean? How do we define those outcomes, what tools should I use, which ones are appropriate for my watershed and not appropriate. So there's a lot of opportunity for helping achieve more success. And is it a reporting challenge? You know, perhaps the projects are achieving success, but they're not communicating back to NRCS, and maybe NRCS is not culling as frequently as it could to find these success stories. But, you know, everything is incremental. If past is prologue, we know this report really builds on the work from Gale in '93, the Rural Clean Water Program, big report, and from Osmond, a 2012 report. So I encourage you to look out for those two. They really showed that only about half of those projects, 21 in the first case and 13 in the second case, only about half of each of those projects were able to achieve in-stream monitored success. It's very difficult. All right, so we'll launch right into the successful side of things. So here we have the 6 projects, starting east to west with California Walker Creek, Oklahoma's Honey Creek, Iowa's Hewitt Creek, Wisconsin's Pleasant Valley Watershed, a stream rehabilitation project in the first case, following up with an on-farm phosphorus reduction and sediment reduction project in the second case, and then Indiana's Shadow Ditches project. Here we have my pointer here, going to help me out. They were all moderately small. The largest was Oklahoma's. It was 3 Huck 12s and hydrologic unit. A Huck 12 is really an ideal watershed size to work in if you're trying to achieve in-stream monitored success. And the smallest was here at the bottom, the Indiana, which was just a tiny fraction of a watershed. The topography was quite different, rolling hills, very steep and very flat, all tile drained, and very different land uses. So if you're a targeted watershed project leader out there or want to become one, you can, you know, thumb through these case studies and find one that resembles your conditions. The project leaders, the first 3 were really emphasized the role of farmers and formed farm associations to deal with the challenges before them and had tremendous success. The word district is also highlighted because the local conservation districts are really the gatekeepers to the farmers in the community. They know how to talk to farmers. They know the conservation practices. They were critical for the outreach and the education. Others were state departments of natural resources, NGOs. The Nature Conservancy is featured in both of these situations, a very successful project leader, and you're going to hear from one of them, and universities, also federal agencies. So the goal for California was they had a chlorpyrifos pesticide exceedance problem, and they wanted to solve it. Oklahoma wanted to remove their stream from the impaired waters list for E. coli and low dissolved oxygen. Iowa, farmers said, I'm not happy with my stream being on the impaired waters list. I want to get it off. Wisconsin, they wanted to remove it from sediments as well and improve the trout fishery. And the other Wisconsin project, they wanted to test the opportunity to target because their watershed was identified as one of the top 10 phosphorus losing watersheds in the state. And Indiana wanted to find out if you only ask farmers to do one thing, can it have a significant water quality success? Did they use geographic targeting? Yes, all of them did except Indiana. They just wanted to blanket the area with conservation cover crops. They achieved that goal. 70% of 3,000 acres did it. 13 farmers adopted. California, yeah, they first focused their all their outreach and education to the 40 farmers and landowners above that exceedance point and then went beyond. Oklahoma used what's the soil water assessment tool, a fantastic watershed scale tool. Iowa did something similar with Iowa's phosphorus index to identify high PLOS areas, and Wisconsin prioritized their stream banks for the best restoration opportunities. The Wisconsin second one also used the Wisconsin version of the phosphorus index to prioritize, let's see, so the monitoring programs, most of them did use the recommended monitoring programs. Paired watershed, always is favorite, upstream, downstream, trend, before and after, paired, and a variety of other things. The monitoring leads were all different, so you know there's no one size that fits all. They hired a private consulting firm in California. The state did it. A regional college professor led the way, federal agencies and state agencies, and then universities. I think this is our last table slide. What was their achieved success? They had wonderful successes. California achieved 3 consecutive years of no chlorpyrifos, the water flea, indicating there's a an ecosystem problem. So they deemed their management plan complete. Oklahoma has proposed to remove their stream. It takes a little while to get approved for E. coli, and they also documented serious reductions in nitrate, total phosphorus, and Enterococcus pathogens, a bacteria. Iowa did document a decrease in turbidity and total phosphorus concentrations, and they're one of my favorite projects because they also quantified social and economic outcomes. I'll tell you a little about that later. They formed a watershed community, and they surveyed farmers who said, yes, I'm more profitable because I participated in this conservation project. Wisconsin, they proposed to remove their stream for sediments. They're waiting to hear back, and trout just rebounded. People are out there fishing and enjoying themselves. And then the Wisconsin and Indiana groups are going to share their projects coming up. So a couple of favorite findings was that farmers are critical. Include them early in the project and help them be part of designing the project and setting goals. The conservation districts are critical because of their gatekeeper status. And be prepared to be in the game for the long haul. Project duration can be very long. It ranged from 4 to 13 years in these projects, and that means sustained funding is needed to pay people to be involved and keep qualified staff. A lot of programs evidently peter out because they lose funding. So a couple more slides. Oklahoma's Section 319 project, I couldn't keep it out. I told you I didn't want to feature the 319 projects. It's so compelling. One of my favorites, Susan Phillips, the director of the Oklahoma Conservation Commission, is a force to be reckoned with. It's this excellent example of excellent targeting and monitoring. And the priority practices were fencing livestock out of the stream, the use protection area gravel so they don't track the mud and manure towards the stream. And they use this paired watershed approach. So here's the treatment watershed, and here's the control watershed, something similar in size and land use. And they had an upstream as well as downstream monitoring station. So they had 2 monitoring programs going on with weekly monitoring. And it's right here at the border, the northeast border with Arkansas and Missouri. And this is a really neat thing. This is a very unique slide. Why is it unique? Because you get to see where the conservation practices went in. This green area represents farmers who voluntarily said, yes, I want to be part of this, and yes, please come and help me do a conservation plan, which led to adoption of many practices. Why do you get to see this? Because this is not NRCS conservation program money, which the Farm Bill does restrict visibility from sharing. So those are one of the challenges. Hindsight is 2020. So it's really neat. We get to see that. And what else do you see? Oops. You see that red represents the drainage area that can recognize the conservation practices going into the monitoring program. So their claimed successes only reflect the conservation conducted in this small area. The conservation conducted outside of this drainage monitoring area does help the Grand Ole Lakes of the Cherokee, which is suffering from all sorts of eutrophic conditions. So it is absolutely helping, but in terms of quantifying your metrics, it's not being recognized because of the monitoring program that they established here. Iowa Hewitt Creek, super favorite project, excellent farmer leadership, excellent goal setting, and quantifying of social outcomes. What you see here is a bunch of farmers meeting several times a year and using peer-to-peer exchanges to discuss what they're seeing on the screen. They said yes to the extension field specialists coming on their fields, doing soil testing, and using 3 agricultural environmental diagnostic tools: the phosphorus index in Iowa, the soil conditioning index, which is part of Russell II, and the cornstalk nitrate test. And with this information, they ranked it from excellent to not so wonderful, put it on their publicly available website. You too can go check it out. And they talked about it, and they just said what's working, what's not working. And they did this for 10 years with about half of the 80 farmers in the watershed. Just amazing, just fantastic. And well, let me just go ahead and show you. Why am I able to show you these green cooperation fields? Because they use two sources of funds primarily: Iowa Farm Bureau funds and state water quality funds. And so primarily we get to show you where the practices went in. What do you also see in this is that their impaired stream here had 3 monitoring stations, but do you notice that the majority of the conservation is not actually in what we might be a drainage area that looks like this, right? So they did have a challenge achieving their goal of achieving significant amounts of water quality improvements and quantifying that, because they did spread the funds around, and so that's another element of discussion. Geographic targeting is ideal, and in the real world you have to figure out, are you going to say no to folks who volunteer, or are you going to help folks out, and how do you prioritize your resources? So finally, the recommendations. We have several sets of recommendations. First, if you're a targeted watershed project leader or want to become one, please use the available water quality monitoring resources out there. Lo and behold, USDA wrote their own in-stream monitoring report, which is quite good, from 2003, and EPA just updated theirs in 2016. And please go ahead and adopt field-level agronomic environmental tools that will work in your watershed, and see if you can aggregate that to report on project level outcomes. And definitely ask for help if you need it. Contact me, contact NRCS. We want to be able to help you achieve success and shout about it. For NRCS, please provide additional guidance on water quality monitoring and quantification of environmental, social, and economic outcomes to the watershed project leaders. From what we can tell, they're really asking, they're really wanting it. And please do set up a reporting system to collect the successes and turn those out to Congress and the public and GAO and OMB who are asking for them. And don't do it alone. Build on your successes with your fellow EPA and USGS partners, as well as other NGOs who want to be able to help you. EPA, consider offering training events to disseminate your new 2016 monitoring guidance to the leaders of the RCPP projects and other targeted watershed projects, and really help raise the capacity of all leaders, and offer training to NRCS to help them identify and evaluate monitoring plans in RCPP project proposals going forward. For the research community, we need to better understand not all critical mass of conservation or an intensity of conservation adoption on priority acres. Can we feel a little bit certain about our project achieving in-stream monitoring if we don't have the monitoring in place? Finally, for Congress, we're calling on them to increase, not decrease, financial and technical assistance for these two excellent programs, USDA's RCPP and EPA Section 319 program fund, and do fund this research addenda. And let's go ahead and require USDA to provide guidance to these program leaders to collect the environmental, social, and economic outcomes, and require USDA to report on their outcomes quantification progress every so often. And for the charitable foundations out there, the corporations with corporate sustainability goals, please use your resources wisely, give significant more resources for financial and technical assistance so we can really drive this new outcomes-oriented conservation. And with that, I will turn it over to my fellow colleagues and project leaders online. While Leah's helping us get started, I wanted to thank Leah Schleifer of World Resources Institute and Emily Vale and many, many others for helping out. Lara Malaguzzi-Valeri is in the room, and Laura was critical in helping me shape the project and do a lot of writing and rewriting. speaker, and he is the Director of Conservation Programs for the Wisconsin chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Steve is responsible for defining and overseeing the implementation of conservation strategies for the Wisconsin chapter, especially strategies that address the challenges of keeping sediment and nutrients on the land and out of lakes and rivers. Steve has worked with the chapter since 1991, and in earlier positions, he has conducted land management projects such as prescribed fire, clearing of trees, brush and invasive species, and planting prairie on conservancy lands. Steve holds a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Ecology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Is Steve ready? Great. All right, Steve, take it away. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Michelle. You did a great overview, and it reminded me then to really touch on these images and go through them quickly so that we'll have time at the end for questions. So I'm tasked with briefly describing two of the projects in the report. The first project was led by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. What's shown on this image here is a cold water fishery trout stream of a tributary of the Pecatonica River in southwest Wisconsin. Driftless area, escaped the last glaciation, so dissected landscapes, steep slopes, flat valley bottoms. This is a grassland prairie originally before European settlement. Now is one of the areas of our state where agriculture is one of the dominant industries. So this project, again led by Wisconsin DNR, took place in this Pleasant Valley watershed, this 12,000 acre watershed. What's shown on the image is in red the impaired, EPA impaired section of the tributary, and in the different colors is a series of stream restoration projects that took place starting in 2003 all the way through 2012. And the goal of these projects was really to see, could we bring back a quality cold water trout fishery back to the driftless area of Wisconsin, which has hundreds and hundreds of miles of spring-fed cold water, but many of these streams are definitely impaired by nutrient or sediment erosion. This again, the insert in the top right just shows the context of where this project area is located, southwest Wisconsin, 40 miles southwest of the city of Madison. So projects, here's what the Wisconsin DNR was facing. So we had streams that were too wide, they were too shallow, they were full of sediment, they had in many cases box elder trees and shrubs growing on stream banks. So you had this legacy effect of sediment that had been washing off the hills, probably especially during the first foray of agriculture back in the 1800s, and had settled alongside these streams at one time probably, could have been a wetland situation. So showing three different sets of projects here, during and after the bottom two sets, showing what sort of the goals were to really narrow that stream, make it deeper, and bring back some of the habitat structure into that stream. In order to do this, Wisconsin DNR was really the lead on putting the science in place, doing the monitoring, and choosing the sites. As Michelle alluded to, the county conservation staff for Dane County were really the lead in working with the farmers to talk to them about the project and to gain their cooperation. In many cases, they were taking 30 feet or more of buffer along both sides of the stream. At one time could have been agricultural land, and turning that into a perennial grassland. NRCS played a significant role in funding through, at that time, their WIP program, Wildlife Habitat Incentive Program, and the local sportsman's club definitely played a role in helping create some of the habitat structures that were placed in the stream and doing some of the follow-up work along with Trouts Unlimited in maintaining that open treeless grassland habitat. So my final slide on this project is just touches on the monitoring that took place, and again, this was led by Wisconsin DNR, and they have a really robust monitoring program throughout the state to try to quantify not only fish numbers, as shown on this image, the change from tolerant fish species, pollution tolerance, to, in a cold water system, what our goal was, and what, as Michelle alluded to, what we really achieved in dramatic increases of in some cases 70 to 100% increases in brown trout, mottled sculpin especially, and then in some cases even our native brook trout. So trout species and fish species surveys were done, bank erosion evaluations were done to really determine, in this case, taking 2 feet average of stream bank erosion and really reducing that to, in some cases, just inches of erosion taking place now in those banks. And as well as soft sediment analysis was done in the stream banks, and that soft sediment analysis was really confirming before these projects took place in the year 2003, which was the baseline year, that this tributary was really dominated by a soft sediment, a really mucky, muddy bottom. And post-project, the year 2013, the last year monitoring was done for both fish and the habitat structures, a really great reduction in muck and mud on the bottom, anywhere between, you could say, 40 to 80% reduction in sediment. So I'm going to transition then to the phosphorus reduction project that took place. And in saying it, so it's in that same geographic area. The red line is showing that impaired EPA stream. In that stretch of stream was, again, as noted on the image, the Pleasant Valley watershed. And then we had a control watershed in the neighboring county about 10 miles away. Again, southwest Wisconsin, 40 miles from the city of Madison. The USGS monitoring stations in place at the mouth, at the end of each of those watersheds. These watersheds, again, in the driftless area with this dissected landscape, we had about 35% of the land was cropland. A great deal was in the Conservation Reserve Program at the start of the project, about 28%. This is a dairy, beef, and grain, a mix of all 3 types of agriculture taking place in this watershed. Small size of the watersheds, as Michelle alluded to, really critical in being able to say, let's try to document change. A small size is better, as well as getting farmer cooperation, a sense of ownership in the project. When you work with, in the case of the Pleasant Valley watershed, there was about 45 farmers total. You can get that sense of wanting to work together on making change. The key targeting tool used to identify where practices could be put in place to be most effective was our Wisconsin Phosphorus Index. It's a tool used routinely in our state for all nutrient management planning process. It's actually written into our state runoff rules on agricultural runoff in terms of meeting standards for phosphorus index values. Its definition is pounds of phosphorus per acre per year delivered to the nearest surface water, in this case a tributary of the Pecatonica River. So you could, in upcoming slides, I'll give you a sense of what those numbers are. So this index takes into account a rotation over 8 years of cropping. So in this case, we can see alfalfa, a contour of probably corn, silage, in other words, all the stalks taken off that field, manure being applied, a daily haul on that field, so it takes into account fertilizer use, manure use, crop rotations over the 8 years, tillage practices. It takes into account the topography and the nearness to the streams, as well as weather. It's a really robust modeling tool that gives you a real sense of erosional runoff as well as phosphorus runoff into the waters. A sense of the scale and the work that took place in this watershed, as well as the partners that were involved. We had a great group of partners involved in this project that are noted on the image. All played a really significant, useful role in helping move this project along. It gives you a sense of the time frame across the top, as well as the three really critical parts of the project. Starting again in 2006 when monitoring took place with the gauges, and as well the implementation period where practices were put into place. That was critical, a 3-year window, 2010, 2011, 2012. Monitoring just ended September 30th, 2016. That's when the gauges were pulled in both the control and the test watershed. Maybe a note here as far as funding. USDA funding was one of the critical funding sources through the Cooperative Conservation Partnership Initiative, CCPI. That was a precursor to as Michelle described, the Mississippi River Basin Initiative, or RCPP now. So this was pre those programs, but again, a really useful initiative that targeted money to projects that could bring in partnership money. Partnership money in this came generously from the McKnight Foundation, as well as from the Monsanto Corporation through the Nature Conservancy. So we brought that type of private funding in place that could be utilized to help fund work on farms, pay staff funding through the Dane County Conservation staff, as well as the monitoring work that took place. Inventory was really critical in any, I think, successful project, really having an inventory in place ahead of doing the work, knowing where to work. So phosphorus index inventory was done. Again, this is inventory done routinely across our state, as well as other states that have indices like the phosphorus index, where you're out interviewing farmers, you're collecting soil samples, and utilizing that information, determining your targeted method, in this case the phosphorus index. Our project paid for the soil sampling on these farms, and that was one of the, I think, a significant way is why we got over 90% participation by the 87 landowners who owned land in the treatment watershed. Likewise, we paid for that soil sampling in the control watershed. I don't want to lose track that we also did this type of phosphorus index work in the control watershed. So a map. Maps, again, are real useful, at least for many of us, to really visualize what took place. This map is showing the reference control watershed on the left, the treatment Pleasant Valley watershed on the right. The numbers on the left in the index are in the phosphorus index numbers. So 6 and greater, 6 pounds of phosphorus per acre per year. That's a significant runoff issue. That's actually at our state standard or above. Those need to be fixed. The orange are phosphorus index values between 3 and 6. And so our project, utilizing that inventory, created over a 2-year period, we then were ready to go and ready to seek funding through the CCPI NRCS programs and engage farmers to make change. And we started by talking to the farmers who own those fields that had the red and orange shades. This is another way of really demonstrating or showing this value of targeting. A bar graph, acres of cropland on the left. Again, we had about 4,200 acres of cropland to start the project. It ended up being 5,000 acres, as 800 acres of CRP land was converted to cropland during the project term. And on the bottom axis is our phosphorus index. So and as the text illustrates on the image, there's real value in targeting in terms of trying to address these concerns. Our concern was phosphorus, And so it really behooved us to try to address those values and red and the lighter purple color. As Michelle alluded to, conservation staff was really critical, and they made the engagements with the farmers. In this case, it's a farming family. Terrain of slopes where contour strips are really critical on slopes of 12% or more, showing alfalfa, some of the corn silage, and again the manure spread or the daily haul in the background. So we worked with 15 farmers total out of the 44 farmers. Not all the farmers with targeted fields participated, but we did get 12 of the 13 of the farmers with the highest PE delivery fields to participate. Critical practices that really made a difference. These are what I would call the low-cost, soft practices that really made a mark because we could cover a lot of acres and make changes on farm fields with a lot of acres. So reducing tillage, everything from no tilling or reducing tillage through that 8-year rotation was really critical. On after taking corn off for silage when you don't have anything left on that field because you've taken the stalks and the crop, the cob. Changing your rotations a bit to maybe have an extra year or two of alfalfa, less corn silage, and then nutrient management planning, super critical in terms of where the manure was being applied, how often, how could fertilizer be better applied to have a less of a runoff impact. And as alluded to earlier, pasture management was key. Again, sloping hillsides, cows near the stream as where the barns were in these landscapes with the valley bottoms. So reducing access of dairy cows and beef cows to the streams was critical. We did, though, utilizing our funding, especially through the NRCS fundings, we did work on some of the barnyards. Again, they were located near streams or stream crossings, as is shown. Projects alluded to in the earlier presentation was also funded. You know, a good story out of this project is the farmers who we worked with, they not only, you know, put those practices in place on those targeted fields, but they also, in reality, they put them across all their fields. And so the acres that were impacted by the practices was more than just those targeted fields with PI values over 6 or PI values over 3. And from our monitoring work that was taking place every year, we'd get a analysis from the USGS partners about the monitoring work. We realized that we needed to reach out to those set of farmers who had fields with PIs between 3 and 6 to really make an impact on those fields if we really wanted to increase our odds of seeing a statistically significant reduction in phosphorus at our they went well beyond that and put practices on place all across their farm fields. So a summary bar graph in terms of phosphorus index values. You could look on the pre-project 2006-2009. That was on the participating farms that we worked with. That was the summation of phosphorus, pounds of phosphorus on their fields. Coming off their fields, excuse me, losses, 8,000 pounds of P per year, versus what was happening on those participating farms at the first year following implementation period. Again, our implementation period was 2010 to 12. 2013 was our first year of tracking change. In the post-implementation period, and we had cut erosion in half as well. So about 1,300 tons less of erosion per year was happening. So participating farms really made a difference, and change was evident from our modeling work. So the key was, could we see that in the gauges? And sure enough, we were really fortunate to have a controlled watershed, paired watershed situation where we could factor out the impacts of weather, factor out the impacts of this 800 acres of CRP change going from grassland to crops in our treatment watershed, because in the control watershed, a likely occurrence of similar acres went from CRP to CRP to crops. So those could be discounted out, factored out. We could compare control watershed to treatment watershed in terms of storm and snowfall runoff events. And agricultural landscapes of the globe, the critical runoff events when our streams get impacted by sediment and nutrients are during storms and during snowmelt, when 50, 60, 70, 80% of runoff occurs. Not during baseline flow when you have that spring-fed baseline flow, but during these storm events. And sure enough, we are now 4 years of collecting data post that implementation period, which ended 2012. Through those 4 years, at a point today, we're at a 55% reduction in phosphorus loading taking place in that watershed. And with 95% confidence, we can say that it was truly because of the practices that farmers put into place on their fields. Likewise, sediment-wise, we saw a 66% events. In other words, during that time of year, April through November, when you have a great deal of runoff events. And so 55% reduction in phosphorus, 66% reduction in sediment loading, pounds of sediment being put into the place. Another nice research component of this project was the USGS staff and University of Wisconsin staff looked at this role of stream banks. What are stream banks' impacts on streams? And through their analysis, using both tracking radio sediment fingerprinting, as well as doing 20 or more stream bank stations along the tributaries in both the test and control watersheds, we were able to, they were able to conclude that in this case, 70% of the sediment being found going by that gauge, the monitoring station, was determined from croplands in the pastures, 30% from our stream banks. There was about an 8 years legacy effect of worth of soil being stored in the sediment of the streams, and that there was 13 times higher erosion coming off the farm field than there are from the bank's erosion. And that 13 times erosion is that erosion, much of which is being stored on its way, alongside the stream or in the stream banks. So this was a really interesting part of work that was part of this project. So in conclusion, we addressed, farmers really responded well to the projects. I think that, again, reiterating the small size of the watershed, being able to have a conservation staff, as well as other partners such as University of Wisconsin Extension, NRCS staff, that really gained the trust. Is just an image back in 2010 when we just started the implementation work of the project. Chief Dave White, who will be speaking following me, is second on the right there. He visited the project area. The farming family is next to him. This is their farm. We celebrated on that September 2010 visit the 75th anniversary of NRCS, as well as this initiative work of the CCPI being the really keystone funding source to get this project started. And I'll never forget that project, that day, because I, as well as my colleagues, were wearing these ugly lime green TNC Nature Conservancy shirts, And Dave White had to bring that up during his remarks about, how ungodly ugly those shirts are. Well, Dave, there's still staff members today in TNC wearing you for visiting the project. And Michelle, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. So I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Steve. Thank you. That was excellent. Thank you. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Jennifer Tank. And sorry, Jennifer, we are starting to run out of time, and I heard you've already been informed, so thank you for helping us get a little bit back on time without jeopardizing the awesomeness of your project. Did I mention it's another one of my favorite projects? I have 6 favorite projects, and they're so amazing. Well, since 2000, Jennifer has been the Gala Professor of Biological Sciences at the University of Notre Dame, and she serves as Director of the Environmental Change Initiative there as well. Dr. Tank and her lab are studying the effects of conservation practices on water quality in streams and rivers in the agricultural Midwest. And the goal of their research is to improve the health of waterways, draining croplands, using practices that work for both farmers and the environment. Jennifer did Jennifer.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I really appreciate the invitation. I hope you all can hear me okay. I am going to talk about the Chateau Ditch project, which we've been working on since 2007. It's an experiment, watershed scale experiment looking at pairing the 2-stage ditch with cover crops to reduce nutrient export. And I wanted to acknowledge my partners in crime, Brittany Hanrahan, a PhD student in my lab, and Sheila Christopher, who is research faculty here at Notre Dame. So moving on to the next slide. I wanted to just reiterate the problem that, or our challenge, that the streams draining row crop agriculture really reflect the leaky systems we're dealing with in the agricultural Midwest. Channelization, subsurface tile drainage, these are essential for productive agriculture, but they also, these practices reduce nutrient. Just for context, in Indiana, 30,000 plus miles of streams and ditches all lie within about 500 yards of a farm field. So in Indiana, at least, agriculture and freshwater are bumping up against each other. The net result is that we get the increased export of excess nutrients and sediments to downstream water bodies, especially during snow melt and spring storms. So what our goal was with this project was to maintain agricultural productivity while simultaneously preventing nutrient runoff to adjacent freshwaters. And we had 2 approaches. One, to plant winter cover crops in the majority of the surrounding watershed. And the second practice, the in-stream practice, was to implement the 2-stage ditch, which is a mini floodplain restoration in that waterway, both to mitigate nutrient loss from fields. So the study site is the Chateau Ditch Watershed. It's river. The watershed is 3,300 acres in size, so as Michelle said, it's super tiny, but manageable. The land area is 77% in row crops and a corn-soybean rotation. The stream averages about 100 liters per second in flow. To those that don't measure flow, often that's, knee deep most of the time. But the range can go from less than 10 liters per second in really dry conditions to over 2,000 during storms. So it's a flashy system. It's about 3 meters wide, and it has high dissolved nutrient concentrations year round. So ammonium measures about 143 micrograms of N per liter, SRP 106 micrograms of P, and nitrate, which was our initial sort of target for reduction, averages 5.4 milligrams of nitrate N per liter year round. So here's the project in terms of cover crops. So I think you can see my pointer here. Here is the watershed in 2013, our sort of pre-cover crop years. It had a baseline of 129 hectares, or 12% of the land area in cover crops in ryegrass, by a farmer who was trying out the practice. We then got a USDA Conservation Innovation Grant and were able to pay farmers to plant about 650 hectares or 67% of the land area in cover crops. And we've sustained that coverage through the present. So actually we're on our 4th year of watershed scale cover crop planting. So the goal was to saturate land cover with cover crops to isolate the effect of that watershed scale practice and quantify the reduction in nutrient loss. Just to place the Chateau ditch in context, I've got a few pictures here. On the far left, you see bare ground in winter, which is often susceptible to soil and nutrient loss, especially during storms or snow melt. And then some lovely pictures of cover crops, mostly in around this practice was that it's not really the above ground biomass that you need to be thinking about. The work is actually done in the below ground biomass, and you can see that in those deep roots, especially with ryegrass. But just to place the Chateau ditch in context, the Indiana rates of cover crops in terms of percent of acres with cover crops has grown from 2012 to the present. You can see that in 2015 it was about 10% of cover crop acres of croppable lands. The Chateau ditch started at about where Indiana is at now, at 12%, and then we're jumping up into the present with about 67% coverage. So really saturating the landscape. Here's what we did for watershed sampling to quantify those outcomes. About 9 kilometers of stream length in the watershed, headwaters to outlet at the Tippecanoe. So it flows from the low goes that we sampled 25 tile drain outlets, about 2 per ag field every 14 days year-round, and we're going on our 6th year of sampling that way. So year-round sampling, high frequency, and then multiple locations throughout the watershed, 10 longitudinal stream sites. Just in case at the watershed outlet we're not seeing those outcomes, we could track it from where we may be seeing it upper in the watershed down to the outlet. So here are the results. These represent the tile drain rate concentrations. The top graph is the tracking of 4 years of data through time. The blue dots are the stream nutrient concentrations, as I said, about 5 milligrams per liter of nitrate N. The brown dots represent the tile drains draining almost 20 milligrams per liter of nitrate N. And then those few fields that had cover crops in that first pretreatment year, you can see some lower numbers there in the green dots. Then in year 1 through year 3, you see the trend of cover cropped tile drains draining cover crop fields through time. And what that all boils down to, 25 tile drains every 2 weeks for 3 consecutive years of year-round sampling, about 2,000 water samples per year, is on average nitrate N concentration was about 15% lower in tile drains draining cover crops. Now you may despair with that 15% decline, but that's just concentration, and what we really need to think about is mass loss. So concentration is only half of that equation. What we need is the flow out of those tile drains, which was measured very high tech with a bucket and a stopwatch. So that's instantaneous discharge, but you can get then an estimate. Gives us a mass loss as a flux in mass per unit time or kilograms per day. So now let's look at the mass loss. So in take home is that the cover crops reduce nutrient loss from those fields through tile drains. It's about an 80% decline in tile drain mass loss for nitrate nitrogen from cover crop fields compared to bare soil. These reductions are especially prominent during winter and spring. I'd just like to point out, I don't have time to show those data now, but we are seeing similar reductions in dissolved phosphorus loss from those tile drains. Similar in magnitude, in fact, about a 66% decline. And what's even more exciting is we're also sampling the adjacent fields for soil health metrics, and the tile results mirror the reductions we see in the soil leaky nutrients. Nitrate N down by 65% in soils, and dissolved P, water extractable phosphorus, down by 25%. So what we see in the soils is mirrored in what we see coming out of the tile drains, which is cover crops are holding on to nutrients. So if I could just conclude the piece about cover crops before I move to the two-stage ditch, is that cover crops reduce nutrient loss to tile drains and keep fertilizers on fields. Watershed scale planting can reduce nutrient export, especially during storms. High frequency year-round sampling has been critical for quantifying these outcomes. And I think cover crops could be used to buffer the impacts of the predicted increased storm frequency and intensity that they're talking about for the Midwestern U.S. in the future. So adding a resilience component to the conversation around management, in addition to the soil health benefits from cover crops, could be a way to increase cover crop adoption at the watershed scale. Okay, as I said, we used a paired on the watershed. And this is the two-stage ditch. It was initially engineered for channel stability, but those mini floodplains that you see here on the sides of these inset channels promote increased sedimentation, and particles settle out on floodplains during storms. And there's also a tripling of the width that increases nutrient retention. It's more time and space for nutrient removal. So going from this trapezoidal channel to the two-stage ditch configuration can really help promote both nutrient and sediment removal, but no one had quantified that. So we partnered with the Nature Conservancy to quantify those impacts of the two-stage ditch construction. And you can see the formerly channelized ditch in Chateau, the day of construction, where they just pull back those floodplains, and after one growing season, it's mostly reed canary grass that help with nutrient and sediment retention. So we used an upstream downstream monitoring approach, an upstream reference reach. In this case, we're flowing from bottom to top of your screen, and a downstream two-stage reach, a half mile of two-stage. Comparing those two reaches, we are asking the question, can the two-stage reduce sediment and phosphorus export, and will it increase nitrate N removal? So just to remind you from the report, here's the two-stage ditch reach down at the bottom, or the outlet of the Chateau Ditch watershed. Those green dots represent that. So these systems are extremely flashy. We didn't know that until we started, but they are very flashy systems. We got a 200-year flood in the spring after we constructed, and we've had 3 more in the 10 years that we have been sampling. So 200-year floods are common in the system. Agricultural streams, especially during winter and spring, this is when they're exporting most of their nutrients and sediments. And the storm flows are what inundate the two-stage floodplains. And this figure on the lower right shows that the lower you build those floodplains, the height of those floodplains above the bottom of the stream, the lower they are, the more days they stay wet, and that's when they do the work. And that, in a wet year, that can be about 150 days per year. So what do? Well, they reduce sediment and phosphorus export by slowing the water over those floodplains. The water slows down and settles those sediments. And so we can see that as evidenced by real-time monitoring of water column turbidity or cloudiness. And you can see that the Chateau Ditch here has reduced turbidity at the bottom of the two-stage compared to the upstream control. And that matches the trends in 5 other two-stages that we've monitored previously. In addition, dissolved phosphorus was also lower at the channel, at the watershed outlet. And the mechanism, again, is slowing water during storms. Nitrogen removal is also higher via denitrification, so that removal of nitrate nitrogen in the water column removed via denitrification to N2O and N2 gases. The N removal capacity in kilograms of N per kilometer of stream per day is 3 to 24 times higher with the two-stage. So the green caps on every bar represent that contribution of end removal capacity via those floodplains, and this is in 6 different systems, with Chateau being stream number 2. The stream is also denitrifying, but we're just adding more area for denitrification with the increased floodplain width of the two-stage ditch. So just for take-homes on the two-stage ditch, it's a viable tool in the nutrient management toolbox, can improve water quality while maintaining productive agriculture, but it works best when in an was our average because we built those floodplains low, retaining the tile outflow on those floodplains for as long as possible and keeping them vegetated are all keys to making the practice work. Finally, just wanted to end with a take-home of sort of a back of the envelope. How does this paired approach work? Number one, if you look to the right, number one, the soil health is improved with cover crops. We reduce leaky soil nitrate and leaky soil phosphorus by significant percentages. In terms of the water that leaves those fields through subsurface tile drainage, with cover crops, there's an 80% reduction in tile nitrate loss, a 66% reduction in tile P loss, and then finally adding the in-stream practice of the two-stage ditch, about an 80% reduction in turbidity and an increase in nitrate end removal in those floodplains. So the take-home really is that paired watershed practices, field plus stream, can be combined to reduce watershed nutrient export downstream. And with that, I'd like to thank our funders. It started with the USDA Conservation Innovation Grant, but has grown into an RCPP project with a whole host of partners. And I'd encourage you to look more at our website or follow our Twitter feed. And thanks very much for the invitation to speak.
Thank you, Jen. Round of applause for Jen's excellent efforts and work. Oh, thank you. Well, we're running out of time, but last but not least, we have Dave White, who's going to share keynote remarks. But first, please, Dave, go ahead. You know, John Larson, my current boss, I just wanted to give a shout out and thank you to him, and he'll join our Q&A panel. And John is our current, senior vice president, and he's had 20 years as a leader in the conservation community and as a farmer himself prior to that in irrigated agriculture. John.
Thank you, Michelle. Everyone has Dave's bio that's in the room, and online you can look it up. He's easy to find. I'm just going to say that we all know Dave to be a very passionate advocate for conservation and agriculture. I consider him a good friend and a mentor. And with that, Mr. Dave White.
Greetings, Earth creatures. It's an honor to be here. Thanks, John. I want to thank all the presenters. It is good to be here. First, I got to have a disclaimer here. I spent my career in the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the NRCS is in the Department of Agriculture. It's not the Corps, it's not EPA, it's not Fish and Wildlife, it's agriculture. And farmers and ranchers are my homeboys, and I'm going to be hanging with my homeboys. So I'll give you a little bit of background. Let's go back to the year 2002, when the 2002 Farm Bill passes. I was loaned to Senator Lugar's office, and in that year, a huge amount of money was put into the Farm Bill. Something like $80 billion was allocated extra. And that's because of what Larry Combest did, and Kent Conrad, and Lugar, and Harkin on the Senate side. So there was extra money coming in to the conservation programs. And at that time, after it was all done, people said, well, the conservation programs got a 80% increase in funding. Now, that is true if you look at everything. But if you look at certain programs, it was incredible. EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, got a 650% increase in funding. The Farm and Ranch Land Protection Program had a 1,450% increase in funding. The Wildlife Habitat Incentive Program had over 1,000% increase in funding. So on May 12th, in the year of our Lord, 2002, George Bush on the 4th floor conference room of the old executive office building signed the 2002 Farm Bill. 7 days later, I was put as the state conservationist in Montana on like, I don't know, May 19th or something like that. Montana was having a heck of a drought, and there was wind blowing everywhere. There was accidents caused by people not being able to see. So in 10 days, we actually put together the first initiative that I know about post-2002 Farm Bill. And we actually targeted areas that were upwind of roads, and we paid farmers, or we offered them the opportunity to sign up to do no-till. We wanted that ground locked down. And we had the first initiative. And I did everything wrong. I didn't have a time frame. I was first come, first served. I screwed up bad. But I learned a lot. And we took what we learned, and there was a little fish during this drought period called the fluvial Arctic grayling. Used to be throughout the upper Missouri River basin, and now it's down to one 50-mile stretch between Wisdom and Jackson, Montana. And, okay, I have another confession to make. I grew up in NRCS, and I always kind of thought the Fish and Wildlife Service like the spawn of Satan. But when I became a state conservationist, I actually had to work with them, and I found out they weren't that bad, and some of them were really kind of cool. They enjoyed value-added barley products almost as much as I did. But I was talking to them, and I said, what is the biggest problem you guys got right now? And they said, this fluvial Arctic grayling. If the water flow in the Big Hole River drops below 20 cubic feet per second, this fish is gone. It's gone. So that was our second initiative. The first year we took $750,000. I pulled it out of southeast Montana and put it in southwest Montana. And we actually paid farmers not to pull water out of the river. And during that worst drought year, that summer, only one brief period of time did the water flow drop below 20 cubic feet per second. And it gave us breathing time to restore the riparian areas, to do all kinds of other stuff. In the audience today is a distinguished colleague, Robert Bonney, who is the Undersecretary of Natural Resources and Environment. And he knows that in 2015, Jason Weller, the chief of NRCS, went out to Montana, and him and Dan Ash, the Director of Fish and Wildlife Service, made the announcement it was not necessary to list the fluvial Arctic grayling because of the work, the voluntary work that the farmers and ranchers had done to create that habitat. What, I don't know, Robert, 300–400% increase in the fish population? So then we moved into a critter called the sage grouse. We started doing that in Montana. Then we did another one for wolves and grizzly bears, predator deterrent. I originally called it predator friendly. I said, oh no, that ain't gonna work. Predator deterrent to help, we put electrified fences around lambing and calving areas and paid people to herd them and removed carcass removal. We didn't want grizzly bears thinking beef, it's what's for dinner. It was all about coexistence, and these things started to work. And then I got a call from this guy named Tom Vilsack. It was after the election in 08. He says, do you want to be the next chief of NRCS? And I thought about 2, possibly 3 nanoseconds before I said, oh, God, yes. And went to headquarters. And at this time in our nation, all this money was being spread across the countryside. There was nice little formulas. How many acres of cropland? What kind of farmers? How many of this? And everybody was getting something, and it was scrupulously fair. And there were actual statutory provisions like regional equity to make sure that, you know, Vermont and Rhode Island got enough money to operate. And I said, this is just not, we're not going to solve problems doing the same thing we've been doing all this time. So we're going to have to take this money on a national level. We're going to have to focus it. We're going to have to go after these problems. And the first thing we did was the Mississippi River Basin Initiative. It's called MRBI, or MERBI. I actually wanted to call it Mr. Bi to sow confusion amongst the homophobes, but it didn't work. So it's MRBI. But this is where I just told them I want high nutrient watersheds picked. And there's another person in the audience here today, Chris Hartley. He was with NRCS at that time working on this project. He's now with the Office of the Chief Economist at USDA. And they came up with this cute little acronym called ACT, A-C-T, Avoid, Control, Trap. And those were the practices we offered in these in these high nutrient watersheds to help start on this issue. I have to tell you that monitoring, if I thought of it at all, it was an afterthought. And you will read in this report several criticisms of NRCS. And I'm here to tell you that any fault can be traced back to one individual. And that person would be moi. I was responsible and for the lack of monitoring and the lack of thought that went into it at that time. I wasn't thinking about monitoring, I was thinking about changing the direction of the battleship. So I digress. So we started with MRBI, and then we moved to the sage grouse. Anybody in here, oh my gosh, they're all so young. Does anybody in here remember the spotted owl when it was listed? It was in parts of 3 states. It was all woods, and it was a huge, divisive, costly issue that this listing of this bird brought. It tore communities apart. And I looked at the sage grouse, and it's 10 times the size of the spotted owl. It's not 3 states, it's 11 states. It's hundreds of millions of acres. So we embarked on the sage grouse initiative in 2000 and what was it, 10. Oh yeah, Fish and Wildlife Service announced on March 10th, 2010 that they were going to make a listing decision on 2015. So on March 11th, we announced the sage grouse initiative to stop that listing. Not through nefarious means, but to do it by doing good and making things so great for the sage grouse, you don't have to list it. And Robert Bonney, in the year of our Lord 2015, went out to Denver and with Sally Jewell, the Secretary of Interior, 3 governors, Dan Nash. It's not listed. This targeting stuff works. And one of the reasons it worked is because we did have good science. And we just don't have that good science for many of the water quality things. So then we did the Bay Delta in California, did the Everglades. In 1 year, we put $250 million in easement monies, wetland reserve, in the northern Everglades to lock down lands that would filter the water before it got to the Everglades. Does anybody remember an event called the Deepwater Horizon? Okay, remember those horrible oil spill? Well, every year for 10,000 years, millions of migratory waterfowl and shorebirds and neotropical songbirds migrate south, and every single one of them was going towards the Gulf. So we did a special initiative there, $40 million of your money, and in about 2 months we created 500,000 acres of instant wetlands. And I mentioned farmers before. When we announced to farmers, we would like to create instant wetlands. Will you help us? Will you flood your fields so we can create alternative landing sites and alternative wetlands for these migratory critters? We started with 10 million. I got a call from Kevin Norton, who was the state conservationist down there. He said, we're going to need more money. In Louisiana, the farmers were lined up outside the offices around the block. They wanted to help. They wanted to do what's right. Short story, about 500,000 acres. Mississippi State did a study. Over 1/3 of all the duck energy calorie days came from these instant wetlands. Huge success. So then we went to the Gulf of Mexico initiative. And then we went to Working Lands for Wildlife. And somebody began to notice, Jesus Christ, there's been a lot of money on these initiatives. And I quite clearly recall one congressional hearing where a couple of members pointed it out to me in fairly clear terms. So these initiatives began to cause me some health problems. And I actually had to go to a plastic surgeon and get a rear end enlargement so there was more room for the boots that were being applied. But the funny thing is, it started to work. It started to work. It wasn't some radical crazy idea. It's now becoming mainstream. And I hope it continues, Robert, but it should be the way we do business. And let's, okay, I've already confessed about my monitoring sins. I'll confess another sin. I was thinking water quality. Water quality, water quality, water quality. I wish I would have also thought about source water protection. you know, so it's great for water quality for fish, but what about the people of Toledo? What if we would have done something in 2009 and 10 and 11 in the Maumee above Western Lake Erie? I think that's a huge failure on my part that we didn't think more about source water protection. But if you look at the report, I think many of the criticisms are valid. I think many of the recommendations are valid. And in the interest of time, I want to look prospectively to what we can do for monitoring in the future. One of the things we have right now is monitoring is very expensive. Steve did a great job talking about the Pleasant Valley, Wisconsin. And I remember being there, and he showed you the picture. It was a mom and a dad and their son, and it wasn't in the picture, but they had a dog, and I swear to God, the dog's name was Skippy. It was like the prototypical family farm. And from that day forward, I never used the term bad actor again, because I think a lot of it is that you just don't know. These people wanted to do what was right. They did do what was right. And Steve told you about the incredible results that they had. But if you look in the report, you'll see that the monitoring, the USGS monitoring, was $625,000. This is a 12,500 acre watershed. That's $50 an acre. I don't know that we can afford that level across the country. But I think technology is going to intervene here. We now have the ability through publicly available databases. There's a company that's doing this stuff. They can take the farmer's precision ag data, they can merge it with the soil data, climate data, things like that, and they can tell at the subfield level where that producer is not making money and where there's a resource concern. And in about 99% of the time, those areas overlap. So if we can bring this to scale, you're going to see the ability of NRCS and these USDA conservation programs targeting on steroids at the subfield level to do areas where it's costing the farmer money and also having resource concerns. I've also talked to some people. We may now be able to do ex post facto baseline monitoring. I think we can go back, Michelle, to many of these watersheds using publicly available data. I mean, since 2009, Landsat's covered the whole country, and a lot of the military grade stuff is being declassified now. I think they're recognizing that, you know, a cornfield in Iowa is not a national security thing. So and if you look at like the cropland data layer that you can get from Landsat, and if you do get the field boundaries, the tillage, maybe the nitrogen management, we may be able to go back in time and see what it was and then assess it now. And I think that would be very critical as we enter a very tough budget year. We're also seeing the reauthorization of the Farm Bill. Congress is moving on in that respect. And it would be very helpful if we can quantify the good that's being done by these programs. One of the things we've got to do, and John and I had talked about this earlier, is not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't stop what we're doing now in order to establish a baseline. Let's keep doing that which is good. Betsy, when she talked about me earlier today, mentioned that I'm with the 9B group. And after I retired from NRCS, myself and Pelmstrom, we created this little 9B group. And also another person was there, Tina May. And the 9B stands for the 9 billion people who will be here on the planet Earth in the year 2050. And to feed that many people, Earth is going to have to 70%, 80%, 100% food production. The late Norman Borlaug put it in terms that all of us can understand. Before he passed away, Dr. Borlaug said, in the next 40 years, we are going to have to produce as much food as we did in the previous 10,000 years combined. And how do we do that and still have clean air and clean water and abundant wildlife and a quality environment to pass on to those little ones who will surely follow us? So I want to thank WRI and AFT and Michelle for this report. It provides us a lot of guidance. It gives us steps to take to the future that we can use with the appropriate decision makers. It gives the people involved now counsel and guidance on how we can do a better job. And by using this report and reports like it, we can work together for a better America. God bless you. Thanks.
Okay, so now we're going to do a very brief question and answer. So our panelists are going to head up. Michelle?
Yes. Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, my goodness, we got some questions already, and I'm sorry that we're already over time, so I understand if you have to quietly sneak out or end your webinar, but please do type in your webinar questions, and we'll be reading some off. And let's start with this question over here. Do tell us your name and who you're with, and looking forward to hearing from you. Oh, I'm sorry. And turn on the microphone that's right there. Yes, exactly. So everyone in the room as well as online can hear you.
Thank you. I didn't know that was a microphone. I'm Sylvia Malm. I'm formerly with EPA's Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water, their source water protection program. I'm now sort of working for myself. And I have a comment and a question. The question is for any of the presenters. First of all, I wanted to thank Chief White for saying the 3 words source water protection, because that's one of the things that we with the EPA worked really hard on and partnered with NRCS. We have an online toolkit that is, I think, helping some people, at least at the state level, working with NRCS and sort of finding common ground and translating our common goals for clean water and clean soil, or protecting soil and water. So it was great to hear those words from you. And the comment is, or the question is, I'm wondering, somebody mentioned keeping nutrients on the ground. There was some discussion about cover cropping and no-till, but I'm wondering, when you're measuring water quality improvements in surface water, whether any of these projects paid attention to the impacts on groundwater under those farm fields, and where do those nutrients go? We focus a lot on nitrate because it's regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And I know 319 now allows a watershed focus, which includes groundwater. That may not have come up, but I'm curious about if it did.
Yeah, I think Jen Tank can also field this, because she has some lessons learned about the role of groundwater in the impact on the surface water. But no, primarily all 6 projects and my lens was focused on surface water. And subsurface water. And the subsurface water, which is lateral flows under cropland rather than deep groundwater. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks for that question. It's great. It's really, if I wish I would have known to think about this 10 years ago, but what we're seeing is that the reductions in nutrient loss from fields due to cover crops measured right at the tile outlet are really dramatic. But then when you measure at the watershed outlet, even though this is only a 3,000 acre watershed, reasonably small, those don't mirror exactly those tile drain reductions, and it's because of the contribution of groundwater. So now we know that we need to delve deeper, understand the groundwater story, but it's expensive to put wells in. So we've gone to a couple of homes in the watershed and asked if we can sample their wells, also irrigation wells, but it opens up a whole sort of black box of unknowns about the relative role of groundwater, near shallow groundwater, deep groundwater, and then surface water and tile drainage in making this milieu that ends up being the signature at the watershed. So it's a great question, and really I think the next frontier.
Yes. Another question. Yes, great. And please announce yourself.
Alec Eccles, Sand County Foundation. Sand County Foundation is looking at taking on a project jointly with the Noble Foundation and the Farm Foundation to assess what we actually know about the performance of management practices on nutrient loss from a variety of forms of agriculture. We've gotten some interesting mixed signals from some of the conservation community about that. So, Michelle, you've dug deep into this set of issues. Do you think that we know enough today to know which practices are most effective for particular locations and how to improve the targeting of those? And Dave, how do we institute that in NRCS's implementation? And John, NRCS is, a wonderful institution, but only has so much capacity. It doesn't reach anywhere near the majority of farmers that we need to reach. How do we reach further to other farmers? So 3 parts to the question. Do we know enough about the technical performance of practices, placement, et cetera? How do we institute that in decision-making in NRCS? And then how do we go beyond just government programs to market-based and other kinds of strategies?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start just by echoing what Dave said, is not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think we have 6 projects here that evidently know a sufficient amount about the right practices to achieve in-stream monitored results and tile drain results. So yes, I think, and there's tremendous other major reports that I mentioned by Deanna Osmond and by Gail et al. Also indicate we know a tremendous amount. So I would definitely continue to march forward with the available science.
Alec, I think this is great about the management practices that you were working with Noble and some others on, but I think you ought to expand it to some of the key structural practices, particularly the edge of field things we have now, like bioreactors and saturated buffers. These are practices that just can knock the bottom out of nutrient loss. They're also, you can able to monitor them and quantify the reductions. So if we're ever going to have credit trading, we're going to need stuff like that. The problem, and if you guys do this, that we got to crack the code on, is that practices like bioreactors and saturated buffers have huge off-farm benefits, but they don't have any on-farm benefits. So a farmer who puts it in is just he says, okay, I'm going to pay $5,000 because I'm a good guy. Well, they can't do that in this economic climate. We got to find a way to make it economic for these types of structural practices to be more widely dispersed. And I think you should have an open door with NRCS to talk to them about that.
Well, and Alec, I think that part of it also in the partnering aspect of how we look at delivering technical assistance. We have NRCS that has a network that is established. We have conservation districts that cover the country that have that ability to provide, as Michelle and others have talked about, that comfort factor, that trust factor with the producers that we're asking to do something. But we also have extension, we have universities, we have our land grants, we also have our ag retailers, our certified crop advisors. I think that, again, it's part of us looking at it as an approach where there is consistency of messaging. We don't want to have one aspect of technical assistance saying that you do this and another aspect of technical assistance saying that you should do that. That's why that I think that as we look at technology and we look at the ability to evaluate and do additional research into practices that we need, that's an ongoing adaptive management approach that we must always take into consideration. If it were easy, we wouldn't be sitting in the room today. It's not. There are so many different parameters that are in play that the variables start to get to that point of really mind-boggling when you start to think about them. So having, again, as Dave and I talked about earlier just today, having this approach of incremental steps in the right direction also is a critical part of the solutions that we can get to.
Are there any? No? Yep, there are. Great. Online.
Yes, we've been getting a couple of questions coming in from the webinar. So this one is directed to Jennifer, and the question is, with such great adoption rates, and it sort of speaks to this earlier question, how were the farmers engaged and encouraged to participate and implement cover crops And did they themselves see the benefits of doing this on their farms? And will they continue to do this, and have they spread the word beyond the bounds of your study?
Thanks. That's a really good question. So I think we were in a unique position at the time when we started the cover crop work. We had USDA Conservation Innovation Grant funding to do this, to go from the 12% that was in voluntarily planting cover crops to about 67% in one fell swoop. And that's because it wasn't through EQIP. There wasn't a lot of paperwork and the prioritization. It was simply, we'll pay the rate per acre that matches EQIP for you to buy in right now. And we had a lead farmer that was very helpful in communicating with, and the Soil and Water Conservation District staff, which were just integral, as well as NRCS DCs, that encouraged them to buy in, if you will, for those for the 3 years of the grant. After 3 years, they've been in. Now we've got the RCPP funding to continue it for another 4. And now once they're in, they're seeing the benefits long term. But we definitely benefited from that conservation, the ease of using the Conservation Innovation Grant to get them started.
Point of clarification. Conservation Innovation Grant funding comes directly out of EQIP.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm just a university faculty member, so thank you for that clarification. My point is we didn't go through the same sorts of general EQIP. That's my only point. Sorry about that. Thanks.
One more? Nope. Great. Any more in the room? Yes, go ahead and answer yourself, please.
Hi, this is Laura Bryant from Natural Resources Defense Council, and I had questions for Steve and for Jennifer. First, Jennifer, I was wondering about the results of the soluble phosphorus with the cover crops, how quickly you saw that. I'd heard from some in the Lake Erie watershed, and I'm not sure where they're getting their science from, that cover crops might have temporarily increased PRP, so it's exciting to hear that you had the opposite result. Just kind of wondering how fast.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was actually in the very first year of planting. So we were watching that SRP. It wasn't the initial focus of the study, but we were taking those samples anyway and seeing those declines, which sort of contrasted with what they were seeing in Western Lake Erie Basin under conservation tillage with tile drain losses was interesting to us. And so that's why we kept sampling. The results have been consistent for the 3+ years of planting at very similar reductions. So maybe it's the diversity of soil types we have in the Chateau ditch. We've now expanded into another watershed in a different county and are seeing very similar reductions. So the cover crops seem to be keeping the phosphorus on the fields and not being lost.
That's great. For Steve, I was struck by your graph. It looked like there were 2 years basically of implementing and 5 to 6 years of planning and then 2 years of monitoring afterwards. Is that correct?
No, good question. There was 3 years in the, you could say, inventory gathering phase, 3 years of time set aside for putting practices in place. And then we just ended 2016, our 4th year of post-implementation monitoring. So 3 + 3 + 4, 10.
That's great. Thanks.
What I might suggest we do now is take the rest of the questions that are online and just we can email them to the panelists and connect people with the askers to follow back up with them, and then maybe if you each want to say something to conclude.
Sure, Dave White sure does.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about the monitoring stuff, and there's one area that we haven't really talked about, and that is the Conservation Effects Assessment Program, CEAP, which actually started in 2003, 2004. But a lot of tremendous work with the APEX model has been done, and it's really guiding a lot of efforts. And Michelle, you know that we know that every acre is not created equal, and that is assisting the targeting. And it would be remiss of us not to mention the really seminal work that CEAP did back in the early 2000s that's guiding decision making now?
Great. Yep. I guess my final thoughts are there are a lot of tools in the toolbox, a lot of ways to define goals to achieve, and a lot of ways to use different tools to track our progress towards those goals. So let's get out there and achieve those environmental, social, and economic outcomes.
And I would just like to conclude with thanking both WRI and all the participants in the room here, and then everyone on the webinar online for your time today. We have gone over time, but I think that all of us agree that this is an extremely important report that gives us some good recommendations and guidance. And it's an issue that we have to stay diligent on, because as Dave said, many of the practices that may come out in the future are those practices that don't really have an economic return to the landowner and the producer. And we need to have a system in place that provides the technical and the financial assistance that helps to get things implemented. And so with that, I'd like to thank everyone for your time and energy, and please send in additional questions and we will get answers to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.